So yeah, the main thing is just kind of capture like when you started, the journey you've been on, which has been amazing, the results you've got, and then any kind of like lessons basically that you would give, or any advice you might give to other people as well. If that
Sure.
sounds good. So when you first came in, what was the situation, and what was your kind of background coming in with the injury?
Yeah, so I came in post longer term injury, which had been a stress fracture, which I hadn't known about, which then became a hip fracture, which was a bit dramatic on the hockey pitch, to having done a kind of, I guess, fairly basic recovery by myself from that first injury, which was literally pre-COVID, trying to get myself back to playing hockey. And COVID obviously happened, which was in some ways helpful, I guess, because it slowed me down in that recovery. And I was just thinking about how to basically deal with what turned out to be pretty traumatic, having a really bad injury that essentially probably caused myself. So it was probably a combination of having had kids and having run too much, and the surgeon can't really tell me why. So I was in a pretty bad place at that point. I think worked back to a pretty decent level of fitness, really quite physio-led, like talking to the surgeon about what he wanted me to do at the time, and working on really quite basic things, from literally I can't lift my leg off a bed through to can I walk straight, can I run straight, that kind of thing. And then I was kind of thinking about getting back to a position where I could play more competitive sport, and kind of decided to do this then. I think thinking about, right, I've managed to get to a state where I'm kind of happy that I can move around, and I think I've got bigger goals than that. So how can I maximize that recovery and then also progress towards sport? Because I think I've kind of like a relatively educated person in the kind of sports sense, but don't really have any expertise in the, designing a program and feeling like I'm definitely making progress. So I think there was an element of me that was like, right, okay, I really want to have somebody who's expertly telling me what to do rather than guessing, which I think I'd done really for the first bit and got myself to a reasonable level without really knowing exactly how to get to the next step, I suppose.
So would you say it was kind of like quite an uncertain time? You didn't really know what things you should be doing, and because of the injury you weren't sure on like the timelines of things, or if and when you were going to be able to get back?
And also like almost wanting to know. I just remember doing my first kind of session with you where we did, I don't know, like testing things, and almost not knowing exactly what had been due to injury and what was just like a normal imbalance, and not knowing, almost particularly with weighted stuff, how much I should be doing. Because I think when I started with you, I just had because I'm just trying to think back the time sequencing. So I was coming back from the first recovery, and then actually found out during hip screw thing that they'd done to repair the fracture hadn't worked. So then had to dial it back down again, have a hip replacement. You helped me with the kind of recovery around that, which was a kind of much more planned process, I think, because of that. So it was right, so I'm going to have this hip replacement. That's really shit, but actually this time I really want to plan the prehab and the rehab around it in a more sporting sense, and to kind of know that it's actually not going to take that long because it's a planned thing. The surgeon told me that as well, like it's quite a planned intervention, so it's not going to be as traumatic. You're not going to be all swollen up, you're not going to have the same horrible stuff that happened last time. You're not going to be sitting by the side of a pitch wondering if you've broken your leg. Like all of that kind of stuff wasn't the case at this time. It was, okay, it's a bit shit that I've like done all this recovery, but actually I think you really encouraged me, you can hold on to all of that, you can still maintain the progress that you've made if you kind of think about the preparation for the surgery and then recovery for the surgery. So that was a kind of unplanned part of the process, but it happened, and yeah, I'm kind of happy that it happened in a way, because I think it showed me that it's not always that bad to have an injury, as it were. And
Yeah.
it was definitely a very, very different mental process from the first one. Because prior to that, I don't think I'd actually really ever had an injury, to be honest, apart from like, you know, falling over. So
Yeah.
it was definitely, you know, a big deal. But the second time, the actual replacement was a planned kind of recovery. It was a planned prehab. It was a planned rehab. And it was okay, you can get back into what you're doing. So yes, okay, you'll lose some muscle mass during having your leg sliced open, but I didn't actually feel like it was that major a blip in the journey. It stopped me running, but it didn't really stop a huge amount of other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And what would you describe life as like now? Like, having gone through the program, you've obviously had the hip replacement. How do you describe that as a, you know, as a result overall from when you first came in to where you're at now?
Oh, unbelievable. I think it's just a real difference in having had really no idea what the progress I could make was, to now feeling fairly able to train, way more conservative, which sounds ridiculous, like because actually obviously I've trained a lot, but I think I've also really learned to not do stuff and when I shouldn't do stuff. So I think learning to recover, learning to do some stuff off feet, learning to do some stuff on a bike, learning to actually rest if you're hurting, all of those kind of things, and probably to have a bit more patience. I think also possibly a bit of a revision of what's important as well. So I think I've probably done quite a lot more work around mindset and goal setting and planning out my week and stuff like that. That's been really helpful in general, because my tendency is probably always to do too much, and obviously had a pretty dramatic wake up call as to why that's not the best approach to everything. But it applies to other stuff. It applies to work, it applies to, you know, study, it applies to pretty much everything really.
Which is that's one of the biggest things you've learned then, as a kind of lesson, just more broadly about, you know, managing expectation and also planning out your week effectively. Would you say those are some of the biggest lessons you've learned?
Yeah, definitely. I think managing my own expectations, goal setting in a more patient sense, so realizing that things happen over a longer period of time than perhaps you might want, planning effectively to maximize what you want. Like, it's not going to happen if you don't want to do it. And my previous default was generally not to not do something, but it would be to do it at like 11 p.m. So like a look at my Strava would probably be like, oh, she's done a Peloton at 11 p.m. because that's when she finished work, rather than, okay, planned in half an hour to do it at lunchtime or whatever. So I think it's definitely been a learning journey in that sense. And then also a journey in understanding that there's a right way of doing things, I think. And I think the 2-2-2 rule of training that you've kind of showed me is something I'll definitely stick with. It has really helped me to think about, you don't have to do everything. I'm personally not trying to go to the Olympics. You don't have to train a million times a week to actually get results.
Definitely, yeah. Well, that's brilliant. And what has anyone else, you know, said things to you about that process you've been on? Have they noticed like that sort of journey you've been on? Any kind of big milestones you've reached?
I think in terms of playing hockey, obviously, I think people have been fairly surprised about how quickly that I've been able to get back to hockey, even though to me it seems really slow. Actually, when I've been chatting things through recently with my coach about, I don't know, just looking at sprint distance and stuff, I think, like, even though I hadn't been running for like playing hockey for 6 to 8 months, I'm already beating my sprint distances from, you know, a time when I thought I was pretty fit. So I think it's been a lesson that actually, if you want to do it, there's probably a way around what you think you can't do. And now I feel that even though I'm saying to myself, oh, I want to sub off, I kind of want to protect this and being way more cautious, that actually I'm being much more efficient and effective when I am on the pitch. So it is working. You just have to kind of work out the ways to get there, I think. So yeah, I definitely feel like I can be more impactful in my, even like just doing summer league type games, still looking at those stats just out of interest really, rather than because it's in preparation for some like massive tournament or something. But it's interesting to see that you can in fitness, speed, much smarter. So I was a classic, and I do it sometimes, and I don't like mind doing it like your classic like 6-7k plodder, and that would be my way of relaxing. And I think it's learning what the purpose of that is, and if it's just because you want to go for a nice run and knob up, then that's lovely. But if you think it's going to get you any faster for hockey, then you're completely wrong.
Yeah. Well, that's a good lesson of anything else, isn't it? Just like to be smarter with your training rather than just doing more. And that's a really good lesson overall. And there's always a time to do a bit more training. Like we've been trying to build up some volume, haven't we, recently with like total volume in a week. But yeah, if you're right, if you're trying to really focus on getting quicker, then actually quality of work is far, far more important now. And overall for you, if you'd said to yourself a couple of years ago when you first got injured, you'd be running better than you were prior to injury, would you have been happy with that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I just at the time it was like, am I going to run again? Am I going to play sport again? And I think now I'm probably kind of just able to, I guess, make decisions not based on an injury, which is really, really nice. I think one of the nicest things now is to run and be like, oh, my knee isn't touching, so I must actually be stronger in like my quad, because that's what kind of makes that even. And okay, I've actually just played a hockey match and not felt any pain. That's rather nice. So I think you maybe forget quite quickly that living in pain is really not very nice. So it's really pleasant to now make decisions based on other things.
Absolutely. So last question for me then, what advice would you give to other people who are on the program or are going through a journey similar to you, might be coming back from injury, might be overcoming obstacles? What would be your sort of main take homes and main advice for people like that?
I think it's to trust the process. Your body's pretty clever, and to trust you and the kind of longer term approach, which I think eludes lots of us when we're injured. It's like, right, okay, I need to make this into a positive. How am I going to make this into a positive? Actually, I'm going to come back stronger from this injury, whether that's mentally or physically. So I think especially with the planned one, the hip replacement, which I kind of knew when it was going to be, I think you're helping really kind of framing that for me and being like, right, this doesn't have to be this massive disaster. You don't have to stop or lose achievement or whatever. It's about kind of planning how you're going to come back from it. So you might think it's like the worst thing in the world that you've been injured, and it probably is to you at that moment in time. But actually, I think seeing life as a longer game sometimes is important. And then also then thinking, well, it's happened. What can I take from this? Is this positive? So, all right, okay, it might get me stop running, but okay, so can I do a bit more strength training? Can I do something different? Can I make this into a positive? I think would be important. And then, yeah, just trust the journey, trust the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, well, in doing that, you've obviously got the position you're at now, which is, after in the grand scheme of things, a relatively short period of time, going from where you were with the injury and the surgery, and then the follow-up surgery that happened off the back of that, to now be effectively running better than you were beforehand, with a completely different mindset really around how you approach not just your training but also your own goals and expectations of how to manage that. Not always focused on the short term, but focused on the bigger picture of something that can be more sustainable in the long run, is likely going to achieve probably better results. And the fact you probably teach other people this, and you're as a teacher, as a mentor to other students, it's very easy sometimes to not do that yourself because we can't see things quite as objectively, and often just having another voice giving you a slightly different take on things can just help you with looking at it from a different perspective. And in doing so, you've obviously got an amazing result and got all the way back to where you wanted to, which at the beginning you probably would have said, I don't know if that is going to be feasible, actually getting back to hockey. But the fact you've got back, you're performing as well as you could do, and you're approaching all of that with a different mindset, is just an amazing journey. So really glad to have been able to capture that, and well done for all of your hard work, because it's been quite a journey for you, hasn't it? But
I think also something you
immense.
said that I would pick up on is almost the time to reflect. I think especially as an adult, but maybe in lots of phases in your life, I certainly do a lot of reflecting with students, and really take the time for it. And you don't do it with yourself for kind of, you know, maybe you might do it when you are studying something, or like you're doing your annual review at work, or you know, there are times built into life, but there aren't actually very many times where that you would do it for yourself. And I think that's something I've learned as well. It's actually, you, with the best will in the world, you probably won't do it by yourself. Or you certainly won't build the time for it that you'll probably offer to other people, particularly in my profession. Like, you know, I spend my life doing it for other people and spending time helping other people do it, but actually to build in time to do it yourself, it's probably the first thing that will generally go out of a busy schedule. So taking the time to prioritize yourself a bit and reflect with someone's help is really, really valuable. And I probably underestimated that element of it as well.
Definitely. So what would you say to someone who was like on the fence about joining? What advice would you give them?
I think, yeah, think about your goals and whether you've got there by yourself, maybe what you can do. I mean, I think I'm a fairly capable human and can do lots of things by myself, but that doesn't mean you always have to, and you'll do it as well, and you'll give yourself the time and energy that you will if you have some support to do it. So I think whether it's, you know, with something particular in mind, or whether it's just, you know, prioritizing yourself for a bit and thinking, actually, what do I want to achieve? I think that's perfectly valid as a human, as an adult as well. Because I think a lot of the time I'm around people doing it when they're younger, and all the same things still apply, but you just probably have less time.
Definitely. Well, Sarah, thank you very, very much. An amazing result, amazing journey you've been on. So it's been awesome to be able to capture that and get your advice as well, because you've probably learned a lot of lessons from this whole process, which you can share with other people. So really appreciate you doing that. I'll just stop recording a second.